Alright, thank you so much for taking your time out. I am pretty excited to speak with you today. It has been a long time coming.
Yes, nice to meet you again.
How should we get started today? I was reading up so much about you, and you have such a long history with psychology and the different facets of it. So maybe we can rewind back a little bit and talk about your first start on why did you choose the field of study when you're in NUS?
Psychiatry. I chose psychiatry more out of curiosity because my dad was one of the first psychiatrists in Singapore. He went for training in 1946 or 47, sent by the Straits Settlements government. However, I was the last child, and so by the time I was 7 years old, he had already retired. But I always used to see his old patients coming to the gate and either singing or talking loudly. And
so good memories.
Well, interesting memories, let's say. I always wanted to know what on earth it was that he did, and I didn't have a clue. So at that time, he was medical superintendent of Woodbridge Hospital, but he retired when as far as I recall, in my whole growing up years, all he was gardener, house person, and person who takes us out for outings on the bus.
Wait, so how did that end up to becoming the superintendent?
I was interested in knowing what he did because he died when I was in medical school. And so I was always very interested in what on earth it was that
sort of nudge you into the field? Or?
No, he tried very hard to nudge all the children not to do medicine and not to do psychiatry especially.
What's his?
But the more human nature being what it is, the more you tell somebody not to do something, the more they're interested. There must be something really interesting back there, or there must be something really wild and wonderful that people don't want me to do.
That's what we do in our teenage years, isn't it?
It's almost like telling somebody, don't do this. And they want to do it.
And I mean, it just reminded me of reverse psychology. How did that, do you have any idea how did that term came about?
I think it is a clear term because the more you try to persuade people not to do something, curiosity starts to play a part. They are interested in why people are telling them no. It's the same as in our government situation these days. Nobody really accepts the official government line, and the more that you sell a authoritarian line or authoritative line, the more people think that there's a lot behind it, and they will go and try to come out with all kinds of ideas and new things to say about it. And it gets worse in our current connectivity oriented world where social media works faster than the blink of an eye.
And also adding to the fact of a lot of conspiracy theory. I think maybe more so in Singapore, not as much than somewhere else in the world.
Well, I was fortunate that when I was growing up, we didn't have conspiracy theories. We were all kind of working in the same direction. Singapore, when I was growing up, was a new nation, and we were trying to find our space in the world. We definitely didn't think of ourselves as first world, but third world, going on to second world maybe. And we were trying to catch up with the first world. And so a lot of it was training and new things that would bring us on par with people in the West or with the US or the Australia or the UK. And anyway, going back to your original question about why I got into psychiatry, it was because curiosity. I wanted to know what my dad was doing. I tried for 4 years to get a posting in psychiatry, and I couldn't because they said that all the postings were full. And the only way to get a posting in psychiatry was to become a psychiatric trainee. And so I applied to be a trainee and got accepted. Of course, the senior doctors thought that I was a bit crazy because they had offered me orthopedic surgery first, such a glamorous field. And it says, and we offer you orthopedic surgery and you want to do psychiatry, it's okay, you must be mad. So those are the kinds of things. I went into it actually without knowing too much about it. In the old days for me means in 1980s or whatever, Woodbridge Hospital or IMH was still in the old hospital. It was a 1928 building, state mental institution type. Really relaxing because each ward had a 1 acre field in front of it. Oh. And so the patients were quite relaxed. They could walk around and you could see the patterns because some of them have their own parts every day that they walk. It was primarily at that time severe mental illnesses. So mainly people with severe intellectual disabilities or people with severe forms of psychosis, depression, or dementia. And over the years, of course, things have changed dramatically and a lot more. But yes, in the old days, everybody would be scared to death of coming to Woodbridge.
I think right now there's a social connotation is still that, people are just scared to go to hospital in general.
No, they're scared to go to a mental hospital. They're much better off now because in every general hospital in Singapore, there is a psychiatric ward. And so there's the opportunity to have a little bit less stigma when seeing. And you find it's true because most people don't mind if they have a physical illness and explaining that, I've got diabetes or I've got thyroid problem or something. And nobody seems to blink and talking about that. But if you say, I have depression and I'm struggling with it, you suddenly see the other person freeze. And I still remember I used to go with my wife she was a dancer and she went for dance conferences and we'd be sitting there and everybody would be talking and joking about everything under the sun. And then they say, so what do you do? And I say, I'm a psychiatrist. And then suddenly there's this freeze motion where you can see them literally trying to figure out whether they said the right thing or not. There's no right thing or wrong thing. People are people. We express life as we see it.
And maybe we'll dive in a little bit more on, after you decided to continue, finishing the trainee and, got accepted to NUS,
No, I think I got accepted to training. It's not NUS.
Oh.
It is Ministry of Health had a traineeship scheme for whichever hospital you're in.
Right.
So you could subspecialize or specialize in various fields, whether it is orthopedic surgery.
And you did.
And I chose psychiatry.
Yes. How long did you need to do that for before actually getting to the study?
It was at least 3 years.
Wow.
Yes. 3 additional years, but I had spent 4 years before that as a medical officer first. It was really interesting because it was different. It was not all about calculating medications or doing surgery or anything else, but it was about people's emotions, feelings, thought processes.
And that didn't deter you of, furthering? I mean, obviously, like it extended for 1 year.
The first few years were actually quite depressing because maybe it was the kind of patients that I was seeing at that stage of training, but for a lot of the patients, no matter what you did, they still were pretty depressed or still were pretty psychotic. Yeah, and I think we were seeing the most severe population at that time.
And what made you want to continue then?
Well, I actually wanted to run away and stop doing psychiatry and become a GP or something. And then I discovered addiction care, or I discovered alcoholism and people with addictive disorders.
Is that what you call pathological behavior? That's a big word right here.
I wouldn't know about pathological because we use those words a little bit loosely in society.
Okay.
I think the issue is looking at when I got into addictions, and that also came by accident more than anything else. The doctor who was actually treating alcoholism in Singapore was going to private practice, and the number 2 was going away for training to Mayo Clinic.
Oh.
And so they needed somebody to treat alcoholics or look after the alcohol program.
Right.
And the head of hospital at that time looked around at the newly graduated trainees and said, well, we need somebody to look after the alcoholics. Most of the alcoholics look like they're Indian. You look like you're Indian. So go look after them.
And was that the offer? I mean,
well,
I'm sure that's not what
I think it's a little bit more than that. But,
okay.
but it was a start, and from the start when I got into it, I was kind of hooked because it is so interesting. Why do people develop compulsive behaviors? Why do they move into certain patterns of behavior and find it difficult to extricate or get themselves out?
I definitely love to like expand and unpack that a little bit more, because I feel that a lot of people just not knowing that they have maybe an addiction or obsession, and just maybe there's some yardstick or tools we can know for someone in that nature. But let's maybe to set the tone of this conversation, there's a lot of fields inside psychology, and one of the biggest thing when I speak to our mutual friend, and it's like, well, psychology, no, psychiatrist is different. Maybe we just want to let people know the difference, and also expand that a little bit more on
I think the main difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is that a psychiatrist is a medically trained doctor, and so we have to go through medical training first. Theoretically speaking, we can do surgery or we can give medications. That's the main difference. Because it's the mental health and your brain, we generally try not to do surgery anymore. I think it'll be bad for your health if I did any surgery in your brain.
So, in other words, like psychiatrist is a more bigger umbrella where psychologist sits under. Would you say?
No, not really sits under, because it's different specialities. You see, and in psychology, you could have gone not only into just clinical psychology, which is behavioral in nature, where you help people to change attitudes, feelings, thoughts.
Yeah, we're talking about that's like Sigmund Freud.
That's psychology. And yes, clinical psychologists, but they do mainly talk therapies, psychotherapists, for example. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they help people to understand themselves, understand what are the inflection points and how to make changes where necessary. Right. And then there's occupational psychology, where you understand organizations and how organizations take place. And so they have them all over Singapore in Ministry of Education, in Ministry of
organization psychology. Yes. That's the first time I've heard of that.
That's right. So it's how organizations function within themselves.
So it's kind of like a business unit. Like a specialist.
To a certain extent, it helps to understand the organizational philosophies of a company.
That's interesting.
And so then there's educational psychology.
Oh, okay.
And educational psychologists would do a lot of testing so that they know whether you have learning disabilities, for example, dyslexia, dyspraxia, difficulty in counting,
that's the
thinking,
third one. Correct.
ADHD, all the childhood things which will interfere with your ability to function in an educational setting.
So occupational, clinical, occupational, and educational so far. And then
there's a lot. There's a lot. I think you have to look that up.
Yeah, you're right. And then there's military
fields.
Psychologists, but like, let's just say for the layman who wants to get treatment, like they would not need to.
So a lay person who thinks that they have an issue that they'd like to unpack or deal with, you see either a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Again, different psychologists have different specialities. For example, they are marriage and family therapists. Yep. And marriage and family therapists deal in the psychotherapy mainly of communication, relationships, and all this stuff. Yep. And if that is the stress point in your life at that moment where, I go home and I feel miserable because I know we're going to fight, then it's probably time to go see a marriage and family therapist or somebody who specializes in family therapy or is able to deal with that. Or sometimes one party says, I think you're a narcissistic PD or a personality, or you have an antisocial personality. Please go get help for yourself. If not, I don't want any part of you.
Right.
Then still see either a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
So when do people come to you?
I have no clue. People come to me because they've heard of me, or they get referred to me by someone.
Yes.
And again, it's a reputational thing, because as far as we go in Singapore, how do you choose someone to go and see? I think that the way that most people do it is that they ask friends, they seek advice from colleagues, from pastors or other people, and they make a decision on who they want to go and see. And then they go see someone, and within the first session, it's the same as for us. When we see someone, we are assessing, okay, is this a normal person? Do they have any things that would impact their lives or disrupt the way that they can function normally?
Yeah.
And the person is doing the same thing to the psychiatrist. Who on earth is this person? Is it somebody I can click with? Is it somebody I can share my deep, dark secrets with? Or is this person scary and I don't want to have anything to do with them? Yeah. And so it's a two-way process. And in that interaction, if it clicks, then the person sticks on and stays and gets help for maybe a behavior or thought.
And is there a set, like, out of all this, I mean, you also did a lot of things, but if there's one thing like you specialize in that, you know, maybe no one, not saying no one else in Singapore would do it, but like what would be that thing?
Well, at the moment I specialize in addictions or compulsive behaviors. And it was amazing. When we started only with alcohol. And then we discovered that drug addictions were pretty huge in Singapore, despite the fact that drugs, there's a zero tolerance for it in Singapore. There are lots of ways that people seem to get by that.
Yes.
And it's a huge issue. And why would you do it when everybody is telling you how dangerous it is and that you're going to be sent to jail and be caned and all the rest of the stuff?
Wow. Yeah. And so if a person would have a depression, they would like you
I treat depression also.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm a general psychiatrist first. You become a general psychiatrist before you subspecialize. So
Gotcha.
the 3-year training was just to become a general psychiatrist. Then there was another 3 or 4 years to become an addiction psychiatrist.
I see. And in your, what do you think separates a good psychologist, psychiatrist from a great?
I think after a while, it is the ability to learn from your own mistakes in helping or treating people as well. Intuition plays a large part. Quite often when the person walks through the door, within the first 30 seconds, you roughly have an impression of who they are and what they are and what the major problems are going to be, whether they're going to be restrained, introverted, difficult to deal with or talk to.
Yes. No, I think that's
you read the book Blink or things like that, right?
Yes.
Right? So it's the same. You go in and into a blink, you have an intuition of what this is going to be. Is this a real art piece or is this a fake?
Yeah, but I mean, I understand all that, and I think there's intricacy into, you know, like reading someone when they walk in the door and adjusting your stance to, you know, maybe the person needs to open up, so you should crack certain...
So let's put it this way. There is a first intuitive feeling about the person usually.
Yeah.
But after that intuitive feeling, you have to spend the actual time and effort to be able to get to the root of why the person is like that. Now, is this person anxious or nervous because of something that is happening now, or is this something that happened in the past? Is this a childhood issue? Is there childhood emotional or sexual or physical abuse? So there's a huge amount of things to unpack, and we just unpack it gently. We don't always tell the person what we think the first time round.
Yeah.
Because the same way that I've discovered over time that not everybody tells you everything, or not everybody tells you the truth the first time they come and see you. Especially with addictions. When patients come and talk to me in addictions, the first time round we usually take everything with a pinch of salt. Okay, so you may be telling the truth, but I haven't decided how truthful you are yet.
Gotcha.
Because same way, they have to decide whether they are going to be willing to trust you with their feelings or emotions or anything else that's going on.
And I think more so the question I was trying to ask is that for a layman, in choosing a psychiatrist, other than just the gut feel that, okay, I click with this person, is there any other,
read up? Yeah. So the things that people do in looking for psychiatrists is they ask for advice. They see whether anybody else has seen a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whether it was good, whether it worked out. Yeah. They look up online and read about the client, the psychiatrist or the therapist. And if there's a huge amount of material online, I was quite shocked when
you Google yourself?
Yes. The first time I Googled myself, I said, oh no, people know so much.
Yeah, I mean, the online world these days, right?
Yes. It goes back, everything all the way back to secondary school, and says, this Dr. Winslow used to be head prefect of Victoria School. I said, where did this happen? How do people know these kind of things?
Someone must have did some research and published it somewhere.
That was OVA or Victorians Association.
So. And I think one of the things you do, and maybe we'll just touch on a little bit, because I think a lot of people are very used to the talk therapy kind of situation. And for yourself, you actually subscribe drugs use as well.
Prescribe,
correct? Sorry.
Subscribe. I take it myself.
And in what cases, or would drug be a more effective use other than talk therapy, and also for one to know whether maybe there's this other option to consider as well?
I think you must realize that in Singapore, people are extremely, extremely conservative. They are terrified of seeing a psychiatrist in case they find out that there's actually something wrong with them, and they're terrified of taking medication. Wouldn't believe how strong the aversion. Doc, tell me anything to do, but don't ask me to take medicine, because in their minds probably actually taking a pill or taking medicine means there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I don't understand this, because people who have diabetes seem to find no problem in taking a diabetic tablet to bring their blood sugar back under control, correct their hormonal imbalances and other things. And why shouldn't it be the same with the mind? It's the same imbalances that we find. For example, a person with depression, the imbalance is thought to be in the serotonin system of the left prefrontal cortex. So we are talking about an actual physical and chemical deficiency. There may be many reasons to bring it about, but it's there. Okay, and the ways to come out of it, there's medicinal ways, there's physical, and there's, of course, thinking ways too. And the ideal is to be able to use all the tools at your disposal to be able to get a person to be operating at the optimum or best functioning level that you can. And why should we settle for anything less?
Yeah, so you brought up this depression and serotonin thing. I mean, are there any other cases where medicines are actually very effective use in mental health?
Well, this whole theory I've been reading things on the internet, and ADHD is a case in point. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There's huge numbers of articles that say that French don't have it, which I think is rubbish, because I treat a lot of people from France who have it. And I think the threshold for doing something about ADHD is important. If you have it, what are the behavioral or physical ways that you can deal with it? Now, apparently I have some ADD or ADHD, but when I was in school, I never knew about it. But the teachers in primary school, I came from a great primary school, Rosyth, and the teachers seemed to intuitively know what to do. They made me run 6 rounds of the field before school every day. And so I was tired enough to be able to sit down during class.
Okay. And what would this medication, I mean, you do not need to put a name if you don't want to, but
most people use, so in ADHD, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder which the brain is a little bit lagging in catching up in its maturity. There's impulsivity, there's difficulties with attention, the attention keeps changing. And to me, I find that having ADHD is something great and something good, because it allows me to think about so many things, think out of the box. I even read this book that said if you wanted to start an airline, have ADHD first.
Is that Virgin?
Sorry, that's Virgin, JetBlue, AirAsia. So, yeah. So it allows you to think outside the box, and I think a lot of the brilliant minds have ADHD, and it's seen as a gift and not as a disability. But unfortunately, in our society, again, it's a very conservative Asian society. Oh no, we can't have that because it'll be seen as a disability. And it's not a disability. Having something or not having something doesn't make you able or disabled. What you do with what you have, or your talents or your gifts, is what makes you either able or disabled.
So you brought up the point of ADHD, and I guess the dysfunction could be also a tool that aids you in what you're pursuing. But once you know how to use it, it becomes a tool. But before then, it is a disadvantage.
So it's, again, know yourself and know your abilities or your disabilities, and then factor in things like that. So for example, with ADHD, studies became very interesting. I had to take it in small bite-sized portions, 15, 20 minutes, and then go walk around and think about what I just studied, or maybe come back and write a note on what it was, or then change topic and do something else and then come back to it. But the difficulty with focusing also meant that I had to put into place targets. For example, write myself a to-do list, what I hope to achieve.
Okay, I confess I have ADHD too.
Yeah, well, it's a difficulty that we have to overcome, because people with ADHD are incredibly creative.
And how would then medicine help in that aspect, or like maybe during the transition, or
Okay, so in our society, again, part of the difficulty is that to be able to give yourself as many choices as possible, generally you have to pass exams. Passing exams is a lot more important nowadays, apparently, than in the old days. And in our educational system, it's kind of difficult to be able to achieve this unless you get some help. You can get behavioral or psychological help, people to teach you how to deal with your ADHD symptoms, how to break down the study patterns, how to intersperse physical exercise in between, and lots of other things rather than just only medication.
Right.
And even in the medication field, there are simple medications, for example, the omega-3 fish oils, phosphatidylserine, and all the rest that just help you to be less impulsive and more focused.
Yeah, I think people also have this connotation of medicine but I mean, like, think of it, a pill or a nutrient pill, like when you mentioned omega-3, it's not, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be classified under medication, but actually it kind of is, like,
it is medicinal food, maybe.
Under supplements or
and there are supplements that will help you. It's the same way that some of the simplest solutions are the most effective, and yet people don't do them. For example, with depression, one of the biggest issues is isolating yourself and not having any physical exercise, or not actually getting yourself moving physically. Because if you move yourself, then you your brain starts to produce all this wonderful stuff, endokinins, endorphins, serotonin, and all the other neuropeptides. But when you're depressed, you don't want to do it. And so sometimes you have to force yourself. This is treatment. I want you to take it 3 times a week. Each helping must be at least 30 minutes. And it's really difficult, but I found people who benefited so much. For example, there's this guy who couldn't get out of his couch for years, sometimes at a time, and was so depressed. And all the antidepressant medicines were not seeming to work that well. And yet, when we managed to put into place a simple thing like, I want your family or your children to take you out for a 20-minute walk every day, And literally it was like dragging you out for the first week or two.
Yeah.
But after a month of doing this, the whole attitude and whole lifestyle and mood started to change. So a lot of the behavioral changes that are needed are simple stuff. And that's just one example. In School of Positive Psychology in Philadelphia or University of Pennsylvania, they have a whole series of things where they talk about things that you can do to push up your mood by maybe 5%. And that's all you need, because it can be cumulative, like 3% here, 5% there.
Yeah.
After a while, you're actually doing pretty well.
No, and I also believe that positivity is sort of like a muscle that you learn, and how I interpret it is sort of there's a way of seeing what has happened, and it's a story that you're telling yourself what has happened to you. And if you were to create those new narrative for yourself and make yourself positive, I mean, it's a positive narrative, and then when you come back to the same situation, you would not have then this old negative thoughts. Or like that might be one of, that's at least that's how I see it.
So that's the basis of a lot of cognitive behavioral or dialectical behavioral therapy, where you change the narrative that you have about things. For example, a person who is feeling down or depressed may come in and say good morning to the boss, and the boss doesn't say good morning back. The automatic thought that may pass through the mind is, oh no, my boss does not like me. But yeah, there's other ways to interpret it.
Of course.
And so it's training the person to say, look at the other alternatives. And boss may be very busy in the morning and rushing to get a project done. Or if you really are worried about it and it's been going on for a while, just go up to the person and ask the boss, is there anything that I've done that is wrong? And most of the time you'll be surprised, because no, most of the damage or the problem is in your own head.
Yeah, no, I would even say that just to look at it from a different point of view is that it is more effective, as in if that thought clouds you in your head and you become ineffective in those after 2 p.m. or if that happens at 10 a.m. and your entire day is just gone, and that's just a bad. So actually, in fact, if you were to just change the narrative and you could actually get on the day, and then if you want to check in, like what you say, you could just check in with the boss if you want to. Just to touch on a little bit more about depression and those low-hanging fruits that you mentioned that one could do.
Simple one that we always use or often use is get people to keep a gratitude diary. A gratitude diary is where once a week you just keep a notebook or spend maybe 15 minutes just sitting down and thinking over the past week and thinking of 3 things that you're grateful for, and then just documenting it. Now, it's such a simple thing, but by doing it, and it could be simple things like, wow, I found the best Indian rojak stall in Singapore, or I found the best place to hang out and relax on a weekend, or I met a classmate from primary school, and we were able to catch up, and it made me feel so joyful. Because it brought back so many pleasant memories.
And what's the science behind a gratitude?
Okay, so you see, the automatic ways that a lot of people think, and we are conditioned into this, is that we focus on the negatives. Oh, life is difficult, life is tough, I'm going to crash and burn, or I'm not doing well at my job, or he's earning more than I am, or she's earning better than me, and I'm not going to get promoted, he is. Okay, so we always focus on all the negatives. But when you're doing this, and as a process, you're writing it down, the minimum of three things, you're actually changing the narrative. And if you keep doing that week after week for maybe 6 weeks, apparently your mood improves by anything between 5 and 10%.
Yeah, but you're right that, you always remember the negative things.
Of course.
Right? And, I have friends who are also business owners, and they're like, hey, do you know that it's only maybe 1% of all business survive, right? And you should be thanking God that your business survived. So, But then at the same time,
I have deleted that information from my memory banks. I don't want to remember that.
But I mean, just also to take gratitude of, the business, working out, and, just because I think entrepreneurs tend to have this like, what's next? What's more? How can we get more money? Grow bigger team. And,
not always, You discover that you can be an entrepreneur and you can go by your own, you can march to your own drummer and decide what it is that you want to do, because money per se is not going to be the be all and end all. I've never had, in my 4 years of wandering through general medical practices, one of them was oncology. Never seen anybody who's going to die who says that, oh, I wish I had spent more time on my business, or I spent more time spent more time in the office. Yep. It's always about, I wish I'd spent more time with family or with relationships and stuff. And so deciding things like that is, it puts things in perspective. And if you want to do a business also, chase after a dream or chase after something that you want to do. Probably lead you to be a lot happier in the end.
Yeah, and since you're on the topic of chasing dreams, at one point in your career, you also went to St. Vincent Hospital at Melbourne, right?
Yes.
Maybe you want to unpack that a little bit and tell us how do you end up there and what were you searching for?
Actually, I was sent to St. Vincent's Hospital by the Singapore government. They said that we needed more people who understood substance abuse and addictions. And so I got sent there for a posting. It was remarkable because the whole philosophy of work and life was really different. And one of the other things that happened when I moved over to Australia was, and this is where I begin to understand, when you have time on your hands, you can actually be creative. You can actually think about solutions to things that you don't have if you are just having to be productive and work. If you think about it, a lot of the really big entrepreneurs, Apple and Google and all the rest, they were probably sitting around, goofing around and throwing ideas around until they came up with, oh, this sounds like a good idea, let's go for it. The thing that changed, actually working in Australia changed me so much, because before that, the perception was, okay, people with addictions, they're doing bad things, so they must be bad people. And the more we worked in an Australian setting where there's a really big narrative about helping people, it became such that a person with an addiction is a person who is struggling, and maybe the easiest way is to quote Scott Peck. Scott Peck used to say that people with addictions are people who are seeking for more in life than they're actually experiencing, but going to the wrong address. Okay? And we find that each person tries to find their satisfaction or their meaning in life by doing things or achieving stuff. And sometimes it's not over. If you look at our situation, there's so many people who come to me really miserable and angry because I've gone through and I've done this, and I've achieved this, and now I'm the CEO. But this was all that my mother wanted me to do. I actually wanted to be a dancer. Or something to that effect.
And were there any sort of experiences or encode that lesson for you in terms of looking at addiction in a different light?
I think it was the openness of the society. I'll give you an example. In Singapore, I'd ask somebody, so why are you coming to see me? They says, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know why you're coming to see me? Why are you here then? Oh, my wife asked me to come. Okay, why did your wife ask you to come to see me? I don't know, you have to ask my wife. Huh? And then I do a urine test. According to this urine test, you're positive for marijuana. Huh? How did it get there? Hello, who am I dealing with? If the first principle of recovery or change or being able to change anything is being honest about what exactly is going on. And it was so different when I went to Australia because, literally I had a person come in and tell me, hey, doc, I'm coming to see you because I'm getting pretty paranoid and suspicious, and I think it is interfering with my ability to work. And so I'm coming to see whether I should take some medication, or maybe I should just cut down on the amount of marijuana I'm taking. So it's like suddenly a totally different lifestyle. The more open, the more honest you can be about what's going on in your life,
The faster.
the faster the person gets back to an even keel of functioning.
Wow.
Or actually managing to meet whatever goals they have for themselves. And the more that they are tightly knit, and you know, it's amazing how many families and how many people I see with really huge big elephants in the room or issues, and they don't talk about it. They skirt around it. They don't talk about it. They don't say anything because they're so afraid that if I say what is really on my mind or say what is really happening, and I'm feeling miserable and this is a hopeless situation that I was in, or one of my family members became crazy for a while and did some stupid stuff, that people will judge you, and that people will then think that you are crazy, or by association, or we have family secrets. We must not share or tell anybody about our family secrets. And so they become really tightly wound.
But you're saying that actually is the interfering them for getting better.
It is detrimental because you're spending all your energy and all your time trying to think about how to hide things, or not really process or talk through what is going on in your heart or in your mind. I'll give you an example. If you have told a lie or told a narrative, it becomes a kind of difficult because it can snowball and become bigger and bigger. Then you got to remember each time you tell it, and you must be consistent also. Like, if you tell a lie, you better be consistent that it's the same lie to everybody. If not, oh no, I got to remember which lie I told him, Like, I couldn't come to work. The actual reason may have been because I was stone drunk and I couldn't wake up. But I told him that I couldn't come to work because I was having gastroenteritis and I was vomiting. And then you told the boss that, oh, I had a migraine. It becomes very difficult because after a while you got to remember which lie you told to which person. You're using up all this brain energy. Instead of saying, oh, I really screwed up. I really want to do something about this because
And why do you think that Australians are more open in that sense? Like, I mean, a wild stab.
A wild stab would be that they're more accepting of differences in people. They're more accepting that human beings are not perfect, and you don't have to be perfect or pretend to be perfect to be accepted. A lot of the philosophy also is that we are in this world because we're going to serve a purpose, but most of all, I think they see it as I'm going to come here to enjoy myself in the world.
Yeah.
And to enjoy myself, I would just do things that I think that I want to do. It leaves them a lot of leeway to play around with stuff. And sometimes, of course, they bend the truth. It's not only Asians who bend the truth. They do. I remember, but they do it fluently. I remember teaching a medical class in St. Vincent's, University of Melbourne, and this fifth-year medical student started expounding this theory when I asked a question about all about addictions. And I was sitting there for 5 whole minutes or 10 minutes listening and trying to figure out how come I had not heard of this theory, until it dawned on me that he was making this all up from first principles. And, you know, it's often like that. And that's the ability to think outside the box and to think on the fly.
But he didn't tell you he was like...
No, he didn't. Of course he didn't tell me. He didn't want to tell me that he hadn't read the book, and so this was his theory.
Right, but it sounds pretty convincing.
But the point is that he was using first principles and basic principles of human behavior and making up a theory on the fly.
That's pretty good.
Yes, so that's where you use a whole different set of brain muscles. And it's not just memorization or following things that have been done in the past, but it is the ability to accept and embrace change. And,
yeah, it's good mental exercise. And I think we talk a little bit about like what is better done with that. Is there anything else that like we in Singapore you see is better than?
Okay, if you talk about the addiction world, we are better because we have a clear-cut philosophy, and we are able to throw resources at it. For example, it's a zero-tolerance policy on drugs. And we throw a lot of resources now into trying to help people. I think that there's about 80 or 100 hours of actual individual counseling time and stuff that is given if you get admitted to prison for a drug offense. And this is hugely different from 10 years ago when you would have somebody talking to a huge lecture and just saying, don't take drugs. If you take drugs, you will come back to prison. And now they're trying to unpack it and try to help people on an individual basis. But it could be even better than that. And I find it difficult because I think we have here hamstrung ourselves by having the philosophy first and not looking at what is evidence-based in terms of what works in helping people to stop. Now, I am all
give an example? Yeah.
I am all for total absence. Example would be, we have people who spend literally their whole lives in prison. Every time they come out, they go back into prison. And I see them in prison and I think, so tell me, you've been here for the last 5 years. How are you going to stay clean and sober when you go out? Oh, I'm going to work. Huh? Didn't you work in the past times when you came out? Yes, but this time it's going to be different. Why is it going to be different? Or how is it going to be different? It's going to be different. Why do you think it's going to be different? I've been here 5 years. I haven't had any cravings to use drugs. I say, When you're in a structured environment where people tell you what time to wake up, what time to eat, what time to go to the toilet, what time to bathe, there's no stress. You go out into normal life, there will be stress. And if you don't prepare for it, you're going to mess up. The automatic thing that relieves your stress is going to come back and tell you, take me.
And they don't see it like that.
A lot of people who go into prison for drug addiction, for example, tend to be kind of marginalized minorities or people who are not really functioning at a high intellectual level, for one. And sometimes they are, okay, but sometimes more often than not, they're not. And so to be able to overcome their addiction requires we should learn perhaps from the best programs in the world. Best programs in the world that achieve, for example, 98% abstinence at 2 years are doctors and airline pilots in residence. If you have a drug problem or alcohol problem for your airline pilot, it's very important to everybody that you don't use and fly.
Right, yeah, of course. I would think so.
And so they're absolutes. We tell you, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you can. The governing board can say you have to see a therapist and psychiatrist once a fortnight for the first 2 months, and then after that, follow whatever program he puts together for you. You must attend 12-step recovery meetings, a minimum of twice a week. You must go for this program or that program. If you follow all these things, then we will consider giving you back your license. If you don't follow any of them, then thank you very much. No license to fly or to practice medicine or to do whatever else. The similar principle is followed in drug courts. Here, for some strange reason, we seem to think that people learn best if you cane them. Or if you punish them first. And this is where we could learn from principles of what actually works in helping people change their minds. There's absolutely or hardly any evidence that caning somebody actually helps them to not use drugs in future.
I think, you're right.
So it's a punishment. Yeah. It's an adverse event. And if anything, if you look at adverse events, they will tell you that adverse or negative conditioning doesn't work in addiction recovery.
I think just to extrapolate that and take it to young kids, right? Because we talk about the punishment, and Asian parents love to cane. I got caned, so does my friends. We talk about it, but I think when it comes, what you are trying to say is that when it comes to the real world, when there's no cane, like what you're gonna do about it, right? It's those people who can survive the real world without the caning.
Okay, but I think
it's the same thing, or is it?
I think that the caning mainly helps administrators to figure out that, we've done something to try and reduce it.
Okay.
It doesn't really reduce it in the person, but it does make you feel like you've reduced it. The things that actually work are trying to get the person, instead of being a nanny to them and telling them, I want you to do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. It is to give them responsibility. Your job is to stay clean. For example, the prisons in California were overcrowded, and they could either continue building bigger and bigger prisons, or they could change some of the philosophy and send people out into programs that got them to take responsibility for themselves. And so they had drug courts, emptied the prisons, offered treatment instead of incarceration. And so a judge can now, it's something like our community courts in Singapore. We have community courts where if a person shoplifts and is an atypical theft offender, you're shoplifting not because out of greed or need, but you're shoplifting because you are emotionally disturbed and or you have kleptomania, or you have some other condition going on at that time and you're in a fog. Then the court can sentence you to treatment, a mandatory treatment order or probation order
instead of
incarceration. They should do that with drug addicts as well.
And the argument is that it's better.
It gives the person a chance to develop their own self-efficacy. Right now, everything is organized where you must turn up at this time, you must follow this program, and everything is front-loaded. So you go to prison, and because prison is good for you, you have to learn, and not only you have to learn, but we have to scare everybody else so that they also don't do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it is so much better if you say that, okay, this is the sentence, for example, okay, you took heroin again. The sentence this time is supposed to be 5 years. So we are willing to give you maybe a front loading of a couple of weeks or a month, just to remind you that this is where you're going to end up if you do it. During that period, you will have an assessment by a team, multidisciplinary team of psychiatrists, psychologists, or whatever else, and they will decide what treatment program is needed.
Which is drug court.
Sort of a drug court thing. Like. It can be done by a prisons or correction service as well.
Okay.
And this drug court then decides and tells you, here are the things that you have to do. You have to attend 12-step meeting 3 times a week. You have to go for a rehab program. You have to do this. You have to see a therapist. And by the way, you also have to go and learn a skill so that you can feed yourself. So go to VITB or vocational training and show proof that at the end of 1 year, you are actually able to sustain a job.
Yeah.
Now, take all these things, and if you are able to maintain them for the next few years, at the end of 5 years, we will consider your sentence served. And then the person is so motivated to want to make sure that they don't. The reward is don't go into jail.
Yes.
And so therefore they have to follow. But right now, the way that we process it, to me, it doesn't follow natural recovery patterns, because the thing is, we put you in prison, we cane you, and we make you stay there for 5 years, and then you come out and you see everybody I just want to get on with my life. I just want to get back to my life. I need to go to work. I've lost so much money. I need to support my family. I need to do this. I need to do that. And they don't concentrate, or they don't even think that I need to pay first attention and most attention to the fact that I have an addiction, or that I'm addicted to heroin. And if it's called an addiction because if I don't pay attention to it, I will go back and do it.
No, I think that is just great. And I was wondering if that same principle could be applied to maybe behavior training for kids.
I think we do it, right?
Yeah. How would that look like if I want to make my not an advocate, but if I want to make someone's kids studies harder.
Okay, so what people try to do is a combination of big stick and rewards, lah.
Yeah. So, the carrot and the stick, right?
Yes, and so very often, despite the fact that people think in the old days it was the cane, or you follow, and if you don't do this, I will cane you. There's big problems in our Asian families because people don't talk. And I've seen a number of suicides that have happened because the family just, wow, they're doing so well, they perform perfectly well in school and everything else, but there were issues that they don't talk about. And they can't talk about it because you can't show weakness, you can't show that you have a problem. So ideally speaking, the new Singaporean or the new young adult or parent engages, spends time doing interesting things, going for walks at East Coast Beach or other things with their family, going cycling, doing activities. And after a while, they get to know what is going to enliven or engage their son or daughter. Okay. Then tailor-make your plan of how to encourage them by saying that, okay, if you're now functioning and you've got 55% in your exams, if you manage to get 60%, then we will, in your next exam, then we will do this or that, or then we will go for a holiday to Penang, or then we will...
So it depends, the reward got to be right. The reward got to be right.
There's a whole process even in addictions, and I always go back to addictions, where they discovered that you tell people the right thing to do, you need to be clean, you need to follow through with your program and all these things, and nothing happens. But then they make it a game, and they say, okay, we are going to have this where we test your urine minimum of 3 times a week. And if you manage to produce 6 clean urines in 2 weeks, then you will get this voucher for 1 McDonald's hamburger.
Oh.
And guess what?
Works wonders.
Everybody is competing to be clean because they want the hamburger. And it's such a simple thing. We spend so much money trying to treat you and drill into you, you do the right thing and all that. Yeah. But instead, they give you a simple reward, and people fight for that reward, even if it is meaningless reward. Sometimes it is simple vouchers or something.
I mean, McDonald's burger, man, it's very exciting.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, or a GV voucher to watch a film with a friend.
Yeah.
And it's simple things. And you think about the cost of actually providing treatment or therapy. It's huge.
And I guess, sort of going back a little bit to, after St. Vincent, you sort of spearhead the addiction department over at IMH. What were the context of starting it, and what were the therapy before, and why did you decide to start that?
I think it was by accident, because they had decided to move the alcohol unit to Alexandra Hospital, and so I was still in IMH, or Institute of Mental Health, and I was kind of lost because it needed something to do. And we had all these skills.
Well, you can't move to Alexandra together.
And so what happened was that I put together a program, and I said to Ministry of Health that we should run a community addictions management program, and we call it CAMP. And it would treat all addictions, not just, I knew that if I said I wanted to treat drug addicts, that's it lah. Nobody's going to fund you. So I said we want to treat everybody has an addiction, whether it is gambling, sex, internet, or alcohol or cigarette smoking and things. And so we treated the legal addictions and the illegal addictions. And amazingly, I think, one of the most shocked that Ministry of Health actually agreed to fund a program. And I think this was Dr. Tan Cho Chuan's time. When he was DMS, he was pretty far-sighted in a lot of impacts that things would have. And we started a community program. It was amazing because we could learn from first principles. And that's the same thing that I was telling you. What we did was first is go research, go and find out as much as we can about their addictions, employ people who, when we employed them, we made sure that they did not see addicts as bad people, but as people with needs and problems who had gone to wrong address to get their needs met. put together group and individual programs to try and help them to change. And we found that every year our numbers doubled. We started with 300 new cases first year, and after 4 or 5 years, we were seeing 2,000 plus new cases.
Is that a good thing?
It shows you that there was a latent demand.
Okay.
Before, for example, the first time I started a gambling program, they said, Singapore, we don't have gamblers. Oh, right. We start a gambling program. The first year, 100 people or more turn up to get treatment. We probably have a gambling problem in Singapore. Same with sexual addictions or sexual compulsivities. I still remember the first time that we at that time it was newspaper. We ran an article and had a foreign person come and share with us his experience in recovery from sexual addictions. And it was amazing because they gave a hotline, and at that time it was this big brick handphones that we used to carry. I still remember I was sitting with the person who was handling the hotline handphone. And after this person shared with the newspaper, we got so many phone calls. I think the whole afternoon there must have been 70 or 80 phone calls.
Just one day, wow.
And not just that afternoon. Wow. And it was quite amazing because everybody was calling and saying, that article, I have a friend who's just like that. And that's the part about Singapore because we kind of don't say that we have a problem, but we got a friend who we know or somebody that we know or family member that we know who's got that same problem. What would we do?
Well, why don't you bring them down and we can talk about it.
So we discovered that we have a pretty large number of people who are also sexually compulsive. And it goes back to the same principle. And, my understanding and reading of the neuroscience and neurochemistry is that whether you're addicted to gambling or whether you're addicted to heroin, the same part in your brain lights up. The same reward processes take place. And learning how to overcome that is a combination of things. Sometimes medications, sometimes behavioral therapy or programming, and also enough work to help you figure out why you did it and what are the things that you can do to overcome it.
Yeah, I want to dive in a little bit about the process and how, it is sort of similar from smoking to gambling to sex. But before even that, we just want to touch on if I really do have a friend that is addicted. How would I know? Firstly, how would I know he or she is addicted? Or maybe it's more a self-assessment as well.
Okay, so a person will know that they're addicted if, it's amazing how many people come to tell me, Doc, I drink a lot and sometimes I have problems, but I'm not addicted to alcohol. I can stop anytime I want to. So I tell them, okay, if you can stop anytime you want to, now will be a good time. You stop and then come back in 2 weeks and tell me how it is for you. And you know what happens, obviously. They might be able to manage a day or two, but wow, after that, it's a lot more difficult than I thought. It's the same as asking somebody, you can stop cigarette smoking anytime? Stop lah!
Right.
And then we'll see. If you have problems and you can't stop it on your own, then come and see us and maybe we can talk about how to put you through a therapeutic program or give you some form of alternate help or some medicines to help you together with a program.
I like the approach. Is there something softer or just being upfront and...
What do you mean softer?
And so if it's like a close family, that maybe have an addiction problem that they don't know of to sort of let them be aware of it.
No, okay. My basic philosophy is that if you want to know whether you have a problem, see whether you can do without that behavior.
Yeah.
See what happens if you try to stop it. I think that in the current day and age, a lot of people will have withdrawal symptoms if you tell them, sorry, there's no more Facebook for the next 2 weeks.
Or no more iPhones.
Or no more iPhones. Or no more phone. You cannot use smartphone for the next week.
Yeah.
I think they will really, a heroin addict, first thing he does when he wakes up in the morning is think about, do I have enough money? Where am I going to get my heroin? Do I have enough heroin to smoke today? All that. And so the first thing he does when he wakes up is does that. So what does a person with a smartphone nowadays do? You wake up first thing in the morning, you turn over and reach out and pick up your handphone and look at all the messages.
That's so amazing. No, actually, what had just happened for me in this week was that I tried to not use it,
right.
and it was kind of hard, really. But because I was just reading, there's this guy called Jim Quick, and he's a memory expert, and he was saying that hey, actually using smartphone not really helping you in your brain stimulation, and when you just wake up in this alpha beta state, which I have no idea what it's about, that you actually really relax, and if you get something that's useful in your brain, you can absorb it more. So I was like, okay, well, let me try reading a book this one day, and it feels great, right? And the next day, I was like, okay, well, this is great, let's do it again. And I was like, okay, I really need to actively not use the phone, and I think morning is just such a time where you have that power to not use it. I mean, if I were to do something like that, or try to stop myself from doing something like that at night, that would be almost really hard to do.
Yes. So this is an example for you that addictions are very subtle. And nobody that I've seen has become an alcoholic or a drug addict because they say, I came into life, I decided when I started drinking when I was 16 years old or 17 years old, I decided to start drinking in life because my ambition was to become an alcoholic. It's rubbish. But, they drink and then they find that it serves a purpose to you. And this is where whatever the addiction is, it serves some reward or some purpose to the person. It fills some unknown or known need. For example, alcohol may be that, I'm very inhibited. I can't talk to girls. But after I've had 2 drinks, wow, I'm the life of the party. I can talk to them. I'm so charming. They all look prettier too.
That works. Let's dive a little bit into the next part, which is now that they have addiction, what are the common sort of keystone process of recovering? So first step is being aware of it.
The first step in all recovery, usually there's something that people call the how of recovery. So how is honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, HOW. And so the first step is to become honest about what is going on. Is it really causing me a problem? And a lot of people have blinkers on. They say, oh yeah, I drink, but I only drink in the evening. Or I drink, but I only drink beer. I don't drink the hard stuff. And coming to our understanding that, oh yeah, I drink, but it's made me not be able to go to work a couple of times. It has caused my relationship with my spouse to be really messed up. It made me miss out on taking my kids to the beach because I was too stoned and too tired the next day. And so it's coming to be honest about what is going on. And it doesn't matter whether it's an illegal addiction or a legal addiction. They all have impacts on you, and becoming really honest about it. And open-minded, because you need to explore what are the options for me. Do I see a doctor? Do I see a psychologist? Do I go into a program? Is there a self-help group I can go to? And then deciding which ones to take. And then the willingness to actually do it. Because without a willingness to actually take action, nothing's going to change. Addictions are pretty strong. I see addictions as the psychological equivalent of cancer. Cancer destroys the physical body, and addiction destroys your mental ability to live a normal or good life.
So after that first sort of like being open and willing to do it, what's next?
Take action. Go and find out as much as you can about the thing. Look up who are the best people to help with that. Whether it is a social program, whether it's an online program, whether it is sitting and talking to a priest or a therapist or a monk, learning to do a meditation so that you can switch off your mind from the hustle bustle instead of having to use drugs to do it. So there's many, many options, but explore all those options by reading up. Maybe read up about online or in actual books about how people have overcome the same kinds of issues. What are the options to do it? Read up, ask questions, ask people. Sometimes a bit difficult because the breadth of knowledge of how to recover is kind of limited.
Yeah.
Because for so long, addictions have been a taboo subject in this part of the world that first of all, nobody wants to admit that they have an addiction. Second of all, if you have an addiction, it's bad, and so therefore we can't talk about it. But the more people talk about what's bad and has happened and how they've overcome it, the better they will be.
No, you're right. And what are the most common pitfalls of people who have sort of they thought that they have recovered and have a relapse, and how do they, sort of see that and try to avoid that? Or is there anything in general that you can share?
I think the biggest pitfall is thinking that I'm perfectly okay, I'm perfectly normal, and so now I don't have to pay attention to this issue anymore. And I think the biggest ones we've seen in the newspapers have been perhaps dealing with gamblers. Gamblers, they confess, they say they're sorry to a family, they go to church or go to a temple, they pray, and they decide that they're going to live a different life, and they manage to do it. In the early stages, of course, when you're concentrating on doing it, it's a lot easier. And after they've done it for a period of time, a year or two, they suddenly decide that they're perfectly cured and they never really had a problem in the first place. And then they think, oh, well, maybe I'll just go back to just try playing on the soccer betting again, just once or twice. And within a short period of time, that automatic reward cycle in your brain brings you back to going further and further down the line. And you're caught. And that's why a lot of people go into regular support group meetings once a week, once a month, or whatever it is, as a reminder that, okay, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Or that's where I will head if I do not pay attention to the fact that I have an addiction.
Are there any support group website or that? I
think most of the support groups are available in Singapore. We have Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Lots of support groups.
So if you would just Google, it will just pop right out.
As I tell my clients, just go and ask Dr. Google where you find them. Or if you want me to print out for you, I'll print it out for you.
Yeah.
Where to go.
No, I'll try to link all that in the show notes, in the blog post. So one of the thing that I'm fascinated about in going in this journey of looking at addictions in Singapore, in the context of Singapore, is that drug addiction is illegal. Drug is illegal here, and one thing that's different from Singapore and the US is that the doctors are. I need to double check that with you, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Are mandated to report their patients to the authority. So then it seems like for a patient, it's a no-win situation if they want to seek treatment. And
that's actually a big handicap for people coming to seek help.
Yeah.
They want to seek help, but they don't want to seek help because the idea of seeking help is that government knows, and government has got one-size-fits-all approach to drugs. So after a while, nobody wants to tell anybody the truth about what's happening. Either that, or you're very much the people who are actually hardcore addicts have a better idea because they know exactly what to trust and what not to trust in public service. This is the people who are generally well and functional and behaving well in society who slip into addictive behaviors of one sort or another, who just don't realize how severe the penalties are for a substance misdemeanor.
And if there are people like that, obviously, they can't go to a psychiatrist.
You can go and see a psychologist. You see a team or a psychologist or thing, and it's actually no big deal reporting. I know people will never feel that, but when I was in IMH, we used to report regularly in the Institute of Mental Health, and out of every 100 people who we reported, I used to keep tabs on whether or not they got visited by CNB. And maybe 3 out of 100 got visited, and I suspect it was because CNB probably had a lot of other information on them at the same time. It's hardly ever because we reported that they got a visit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
and because my impression is that CNB actually wants people to get help and get well so that they don't have to.
Well, we all hope so.
We hope so.
Yes. No, so I mean, I'm saying it more for the people who are addicts and found that they are addicts and they're just like, well, what should I do? I can't turn to
seek help. Go and seek a counselor first. There's counseling agencies, We Care Community Services.
But counselors are also mandated to.
No, the only people who are mandated to report are people registered under the Medical Act.
Okay. There we go. So at least now...
you can see a psychologist, you can see a counselor, you can see a therapist. You can see anybody as long as you're not seeing them as a doctor.
Cool. And I think that sort of wraps it up a little bit. I mean, maybe we want to talk a little bit about the clinic. That's one of those things that was question that I had before. It's like, why did you decide to
why set up a clinic?
Yeah, and then, I mean, obviously, I assume that you are having a pretty good gig over at IMH.
Oh yeah, I was actually enjoying life in the Institute of Mental Health, and I really enjoyed setting up services. But when I looked at all my seniors and those retiring, I thought that in my family nobody has ever left the civil service, as far as I know, and I wanted to try something different. Advantages of ADHD, but very conservative ADHD as far as I can tell, and so I wanted to come out and try what private service was like. Plus, I liked the fact that I could do whatever I wanted and figure out whatever I wanted. So we set up a service, a Promises Healthcare, where we still work. We're not a typical psychiatric practice because we work with a whole multidisciplinary team of psychologists, social workers, psychotherapists, art therapists, drama therapists. And working with a team is actually very costly, but we find that using different modalities and group therapy and individual therapy often helps people to make those leaps into changing lifestyle and behavior much better than just one-on-one therapy or medication.
And that's what you can do at IMH?
No. It gives me the freedom to engage with multiple disciplines, engage with multiple agencies in a lot less regimented way than IMH.
Basically faster.
Faster.
Okay. Well, let's dive into a quick round of questions. Are there any books or book that you have given most as a gift?
Well, in my clinic, the most frequent book given out is the Big Book. It's the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, written by a whole bunch of people, Bill Wilson and Bob Smith, in the late 1930s. And since then, it has been a bestseller, but it is basically both a process for 12-step work or Alcoholics Anonymous, plus a lot of stories, and people basically can use that as their own guide or reading about, for example, this chapter 5 is how it works. And so when they read this, they can work out for themselves what they need to do.
The Big Book.
The Big Book.
Yes.
Alcoholics Big Book. The Bible of the Alcoholics.
Wait, so the title is The Big Book?
It is.
Okay. I'll come back to you if I can find it. Are there any favorite movies or documentaries?
I just like action movies, basically. Again, ADHD, but...
Yeah, Iron Man. Iron Man for me.
Yeah, Iron Man and all the rest of it. I mean, it's fun, it's mindless, and you know they're going to win in the end.
Got it.
Sometimes a little bit more poignant stuff. I like Flight. Denzel Washington.
Oh, that's the one that...
where he was an addict.
Yeah.
Yes, and...
That was really good.
Yes, it was. First of all, it tells you that there are a lot of very high-functioning addicts around in the world, just that they don't get caught most of the time, and they manage to function, but at some level, they need help too.
What have you purchased recently under $100 that have most impacted you in your life?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. The most impacted me would be food under $100.
No problem. What's the worst advice you see or hear being dispensed in your circle?
just stop it. You know, a lot of people says, I don't know what's wrong with my son, or I don't know what's wrong with him. I've told him to stop using drugs and he can't. If a person with an addiction could stop it, they would have stopped it. And it's the worst advice. It's the same as Nancy Reagan used to run a campaign in the US. Just stop it. And again, it's crazy. If you could stop, you would.
If you can send a message back in time to your 20 and 30-year-old self, and tell him to cultivate a skill or a habit, what would that be?
I think it would be, don't be afraid of change. Embrace change and be willing to just take it as it is, as it comes. We are sometimes way too conservative. If I had taken a leap and done a lot of the things that I know now a lot earlier, it would have saved a lot of heartaches.
And is there any practice or things you would tell him for him to kick in the butt to take the leap of faith?
No, I would have gone out into private practice a lot earlier. Or decided to change things a lot earlier, or attempted to ask for a grant from the government to do new programs a lot earlier. And, I've also discovered along the way that not making a decision or not doing something is also a decision.
Indecision.
Yes, indecision is also a big decision.
Yeah, I think this is something that I realize too, and I tell people all the time, is that patience is not a virtue. Perseverance is.
Yeah.
But run because the time is slipping like sand away from your hands.
That's right.
Yeah, and when you think of the word successful, who came to your mind and why?
Well, if I think successful, I think of my own clients or patients who have really turned their lives around. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in addictions, because almost every week or month, I see at least a few people who have managed to turn things totally around, where there's a total mess, no relationship, no good family life, no ability to enjoy life or things. But you make good decisions. You follow through on values, a value-based program for recovery. And I think there are too many for me to count at the moment. But that's one of the things that keeps me engaged and keeps me wanting to do the same work every day. In fact, I would like to know how to do it better. Is there better medicines? Are there better programs? Are there better processes? What can we do to put it together, to systems together to make stuff better? And that's what we're doing now. I work with a couple of charities and with the private and public services. Let's research it. Let's figure out how we can do things better.
What are some of the most common misconceptions about you or your work?
Okay, the biggest one is people coming in and thinking that there's a magic pill for everything. Coming in and say, Doc, I want you to give me a pill that will stop me using drugs forever. And I said, yeah, there is such a pill. It's called Cyanide. It's kind of permanent. But if you really want to be alive, and you're actually going to have to put in effort and time. And so that's the biggest one as far as I can tell. They all want a magic pill. Just give me something that will make me not feel, or not want to have a drink, or not want to use drugs, or not go out and be compulsive about this behavior or that.
Are there any asks or requests for the audience? Last parting words, thoughts to take away, to consider, to try?
Oh, I'm open to all things. If they have anybody has heard of or has got great new ways of overcoming addictions, let me know.
Any upcoming projects that people can look forward to, or research papers for you?
I think at the moment, one of the things that Promises Healthcare is trying to do is develop and set up a mental health charity, which deals mainly with depression, bipolar, and support groups. So support groups, mental health programs, and we are trying to see whether we can do a drop-in center or drop-in cafe so that people with low moods or depression If they want help, there will be always therapists or counselors available.
Wow, there's a lot of things. And when is there a date, or once is there a sequence?
Well, it will happen within the next year.
Wow. Okay.
We've already done one for addictions. It's called We Care Community Services, and it's at Ubi, Jalan Ubi. Go for it.
Do you want to tell people about We Care?
Yeah, We Care is great because when I was traveling and looking at best programming, we managed to get people well or detox them in a hospital setting. Then we send them out to the community and we find that they relapse. So we needed more support services. In other countries, they have drop-in centers, centers where while you're in your recovery, you can go and have a therapist to talk to in case you're having urges to use or stuff. There's bookshelves, there's games, there's activities in a safe setting. And so that is We Care Community Services. Great program for people recovering from gambling, addictions, alcohol, drugs.
Got it. Where can people find you or the latest updates on the interwebs?
The internet, I guess.
Okay, just search my name. Is there a place of gathering of all this information?
Promises Healthcare.
Okay, Facebook page too. Right,
I sure hope so. I don't know.
Perfect. We're done.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I timed it well, I guess.
Excellent.